Hi guys, I'm going to give you some notes on week one of the class on environmental security. This is a bit of an experiment. I haven't really done anything like this before. I'm going to try and do it in one take. I may do some modest editing. Wanted to review the three questions that we posed for the class. What is the environment? What is security? And what is environmental security? From Johnson, we get the sense that the environment is the natural world, the set of life-sustaining processes on the planet, from soil, water, air that sustain life for humans and other species. We're concerned with environmental degradation, which means deteriorations in that natural environment that are caused by humans. And that deterioration is relative to what humans need for survival, or perhaps what other species need for survival. But it's distinguishable from environmental change that's caused by natural processes like volcanoes. So again, we're concerned with the environment, this natural world of life-sustaining processes, and we're concerned with environmental degradation, which is deterioration in those life-sustaining processes that caused by humans. Other things that constitute environmental change, like volcanic eruption that may have an impact on human life or the life of other species, that's different. So that's the environment. What about what is security? Well, we have a classic conception of security threats. The classic conception is armed external attacks against the state by other states. And you have a narrow view of what is the right realm of study for security studies from Steve Walt, who says security studies is the studies of the use or threats of the use of force. As we know, in the early 1990s, there was an effort to broaden the understanding of security as the Cold War wound down. There were folks who were hoping to capitalize on the peace dividend to repurpose funds for security to other purposes. And it raises the question about whether other threats rise to the level of security problems. And there was an effort in the early 1990s to expand the notion of security to encompass other harms and threats to human well-being. Some went so far as to talk about human security, and it raises this question about whose security matters. Is it simply the security of states or the security of individuals and communities? The human security concept suggested that the security of individuals and communities mattered as much, if not more, than the security of states. Now, in this broadening effort, Ullman offered a sort of qualified broadening to suggest that other threats to human well-being might constitute security threats if they could lead to dramatic short-term degradation in the quality of life of a people, or that's kind of secondarily if the threat could foreclose the options available to a state. The human security concept went even farther and talked about threats to the vital core of human needs, and that could be economic needs, food needs, shelter needs, cultural needs, environmental needs, personal safety needs. Some folks, like Roland Paris, pushed back on that, and I think that was also true for Steve Walt, who suggested that if security is to mean something, it needs to have a relatively bounded conception, because if everything is security, the term loses its coherence, it loses its power, and it becomes meaningless. So is there a way forward? Well, in my work, I tried to get at risks to the survival caused by other threats. So could other problems other than violence rise to the level of security problems because they threaten potentially to kill large numbers of people? And arguably, these actorless threats that we read about from Morgan Bazilian and Cullen Hendricks, there are threats that rise to the level of security problems that lack human agency. There is no person intentionally trying to do us harm, Nonetheless, they rise to the level of security problems because of the severity of their impacts, and in this case, the potential to kill large numbers of people. So that may be a way forward to emphasize the severity of the impacts, not the intentionality of some foreign aggressor, though those threats still exist. But what distinguishes security problems, again, is not the intentionality of some actor trying to do us harm, but the severity of the impacts. One final thing I would say, two things. Paris helpfully identifies a typology of threats. Some threats are to states, and some threats are to communities and individuals. And some threats are of a military nature, and some threats are not of a military nature. And we can think about security threats from military sources are like those classic threats to states. That's the classic hallmark of what the field has been worried about. But there are other non-military threats to states, and there are also military and non-military threats to communities and individuals. And that 2x2 typology could be a helpful way of thinking through different categories of threats. So what is environmental security? Environmental security constitutes a realm that's looking at degradation and changes in the natural world made by humans that may lead to security outcomes. That includes violence, but it may include other threats to human well-being that could cause large-scale loss of life that emanate from environmental degradation. Hopefully that gives us some bounded sense of what the class is about. And as I said in our first session, a lot of the emphasis in academic studies on environment and security, which we'll talk about in 2 weeks' time, focuses more narrowly on the connections between environmental degradation and violence. And that, on some level, I think is an impoverished and too limiting perspective on what the field should cover, but that's what it has covered. So we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Hopefully this little video summarizes what we discussed in class helpfully, and I'll give you some food for thought for the next time we meet. See you then. Bye-bye.